Welcome to this overview of the Highway Capacity Analysis webinar series that would cover Highway Capacity Manual 6th edition and the Highway Capacity Software Release 7. What I'm going to do here is go through in general the changes in the manual and demonstrate how those are implemented in the software as a preview of what a training course would look like. My name is Bill Sampson. I run the McTrans Center at the University of Florida. We're responsible for the Highway Capacity Software. Been involved with the Highway Capacity Committee for about 30 years now. There's contact information for me there. Again, we're going to go over the general overview of changes by chapter of the manual and module of the software, dating back to what happened in 2010 because it's so significant, into the 6th edition, and then what's happening right now. I'm going to hold questions until the end since we're recording this to post, but then I'm happy to answer any questions that might come up. So organization of the 6th edition did not change from 2010. It's still 3 printed volumes and a 4th volume online. That was new in 2010, done to accommodate the page limitation for the printed book. Essentially what happened were that the appendices for the computational chapters in volumes 2 and 3 were relegated to PDF files online. About $3 million of research between $5 million of research between the 2000 manual and the 2010 edition, and a similar amount, I don't know what the dollar amount is, but similar amount between 2010 and the 6th edition. The two biggest changes, or additions I should say, were alternative intersections, travel time reliability. Alternative intersections include a divergent diamond interchange, restricted crossing U-turn superstreet intersection, displaced left turn continuous flow intersection, and a median U-turn intersection as well. Travel time reliability includes the ability to look at hundreds of scenarios to expand the analysis to get a distribution of results over, let's say, an entire year instead of one 15-minute analysis period, which is typical. I'm going to look at the procedures, but again, only as an overview level, showing you what's changed in the 6th edition of the manual and the 7th release of the software. Quick background of the manual: it all started in 1950. The Bureau of Public Roads is now the Federal Highway Administration. A major update in 1965, lots of expanded procedures, but both of these versions were more academic. You kind of learned them in college, you passed the test, you graduated, you went out to work, and you never saw them again. But that all changed in 1985. In 1985, 2 or 3 things happened. The Transportation Research Board took this on as its #1 bestseller now. The National Cooperative Highway Research Program and the Federal Highway Administration funded research in advance of and have funded research since the 85 manual. There's also the Highway Capacity Committee that reviews what goes into the manual, which makes this research driven and backed and peer reviewed, with very defendable sets of procedures for just about anything you want to do in the transportation engineering and planning world. Another thing happened in 1985. This little thing called a personal computer showed up, and that allowed these procedures to be automated and to limit the errors and the time that it takes to run through the procedures. So you couple all of this, peer-reviewed, research-driven, automated in software, with the fact that these procedures are used in planning, design, operations, signal timing, traffic impact studies, and all of a sudden this became probably the most widely used set of procedures in the transportation engineering world. Updates in 94 and 97, a new manual in 2000, another new manual in 2010, and then the 6th edition came in 2016. And each time the manual was revised, it got bigger and more complicated. We're up to 37 chapters now, and some models that are not even documented in text, but in Visual Basic Code. Very quickly, I'll run through these projects to give you a sense for what happened between 2000 and 2010 and 2010 in the 6th edition. The first project is Interchange ramp terminals to look at the two signals controlling the ramps to and from an arterial. This is Lily Eleftheriadou. She's a professor here at the University of Florida and the former chair of the capacity committee. It was her job to get the 6th edition out the door, which she did, and now she's rotated off as chair. Peter Kuntz up in Portland, Oregon, created the applications guide that took the relatively simplistic example problems in the manual and expanded them into much more detailed real-world examples to answer more questions for a series of situations. Lee Rodegers of Kittleson and Associates led the research study to model roundabouts, to do a single-lane roundabout, a two-lane roundabout, single-lane or two-lane approach with bypass lanes, yielding and non-yielding, all covered to get delay level of service for roundabouts. The one thing they were not able to do is find enough roundabouts operating at capacity with enough demand to measure capacity, and so capacity probably was underestimated until that got modified for the 6th edition. Urban Streets Multimodal, this is Rick Dowling, a consultant out in Oakland, California. And this is the first time the manual has created level of service analyses for pedestrians, bicycles, and buses. We've always modeled the impacts of PEDs, bikes, and buses on the automobile, but this looks at it from those other modes' perspective. The perfect tool, actually, for quantifying trade-offs for the implementation of complete streets or road diets. Weaving, Roger Ross at Polytechnic University in New York City updated this chapter to, and updated it totally. It's very different than it was before, to base the procedure on lane changing rates and come up with a much better approach to modeling freeway weaving. Probably the biggest impact over this almost 20-year period now is this next one. Jim Bonison, professor at Texas A&M at the time, modified the signalized intersection urban streets procedure significantly. It took those two procedures from what I would term as questionable at some level to being by far the best way of doing these, modeling these situations out there. And I'll just give you 4 quick examples. Before 2010, the signalized intersection procedure did not force the phasing to adhere to NEMA. In other words, it would model phasing that the controller could not physically do, let's say, and that's been addressed. It now adheres to NEMA very carefully. Phase duration. Up until 2010, the user had to come up with how long an actuated phase would last on average over multiple periods in a 15-minute, over multiple cycles in a 15-minute period, a thing that you probably just couldn't know. And the phase duration model now models that and comes up with a very good estimate of phase duration average over the multiple cycles, which would, every actuated phase would vary among those cycles to get an average that allows us to convert saturation flow to capacity. For urban streets, the flow profile, a model out of Transit 7F that's been around for decades, replaces arrival type. Arrival type is picking a number between 1 and 6 to estimate how well signals are coordinated along an arterial, where the flow profile models the platoon from one signal to the next in very precise terms to come up with proportion arriving on green downstream. And of course, the more that arrive on green and have 0 delay downstream, the better the coordination. The last one I'll mention is access points. And if you've ever done any signal timing, you know that access points between signals really affect the platoon going from one signal to the next. Every time someone turns into a driveway or a side street, the platoon slows down and breaks into pieces, which makes the proportion arriving on green deteriorate rapidly. It does exist out there and therefore needs to be modeled, as opposed to just assuming everything is fine and the access points are not having the effect when they really are. And that spills over into signal timing optimization as well. Alternative tools. This was Ken Courage, University of Florida. He made a list of everything the manual could not do, and then provided suggestions, advice, guidance to change parameters in simulation tools so that the simulation results could be labeled for level of service if they were HCM compliant. Essentially changing underlying parameters to think and produce results similar to the HCM procedures. HCM 2010, this is Mark Van de Hey at Kittleson Associates that came up that managed the project to get the HCM 2010 finalized and approved and printed. Managed lanes beyond 2010, this is Yen-Hai Wong, University of Washington, and for the first time we could now model managed lanes, an HOV and HOT lane, to get density and level of service of the managed lane facility in addition to the general purpose lanes. Roundabout corridors, Lee Ridiger again at the Kittleson Associates did two things. One, the primary project was to model the segments between roundabouts, just like we model segments between signals, to come up with a facility level of service for roundabouts, multiple roundabouts along an arterial. But at the same time, they went back and revisited capacity at roundabouts, now able to find more roundabouts with enough demand to be able to measure capacity. And over that time, drivers got more efficient, which also made capacity go up. So the new roundabout capacity models increased capacity about 30% over what was in the 2010 version. Work zone capacity, Jim Shane out in Tucson, Arizona. This was to better model the effects of work zones on the capacity of freeways. And this also looked at speed as well as capacity on freeways with many more parameters than just lane width and proximity of ramps, which is what we looked at before. This included barrier type, lateral distance from the barrier to the travel lane, speed zone in the work zone compared with normal speed zone, day or night operations, urban or rural environment. Alternative intersections with the Saxon Traffic Operations Lab in McLean, Virginia, looked at, again, the DDI, the RCUT, the MUT, and the DLT to come up with procedures consistent with the urban streets procedures in the manual for these 4 other interchange and intersection types. Travel time reliability, a SHARP 2 project to look at a distribution of what's called the travel time index over, let's say, 520 scenarios that might be looking at 260 work days, AM and PM peak, and see that distribution as demand varies, weather varies, lane closures happen, special events occur, and work zones are in place. The truck procedure to come up with passenger car equivalents for trucks was modified to better classify trucks as tractor trailers and single unit trucks, where single unit trucks includes buses, recreational vehicles, and the 2-axle rental truck you see, as well as adding something called a mixed flow model for that situation where you have steep upgrades and lots of trucks where passenger car equivalence is not a good enough procedure, and you have to model the change in the speed flow curves. Then John Zagier led the project to get the 6th edition out the door from Kittleson and Associates. So again, the Highway Capacity Manual is research-driven and peer-reviewed, which makes it much more defendable than almost any other way to look at any of these things. And now that some of the gaps have been filled, it is by far the way to model an intersection or a signal or a freeway or a highway. The highway capacity software has always implemented these procedures faithful to the manual. It is not our job to modify things or tweak things. We put into the software exactly what was built by the research and approved by the committee. A brief run through the highway capacity software evolution like we did the manual. It all started in 1987, written on an Apple IIe at Polytechnic University in New York City, converted to DOS by the Federal Highway Administration and given to McTrans to sell and support and maintain, which we've done. Each time the manual came out with a major change, we changed the software interface to keep up with the times. Full color interface with full color monitors in the early 90s, mouse support where that mouse had shown up, and the F1 key generated help on context sensitive help in the software itself. Converted to Windows in 1998 with the 97 update of the manual, which was a major effort with a self-supporting McTrans center that's not funded by research. Got that out the door. The 2000 manual came along. We were able to move that along pretty quickly already in Windows. Between the 2000 and 2010 manual, HCS had a major upgrade in HCS Plus in 2005 that bridged the gap between the deterministic HCS and the stochastic simulation of CoreSim. So you could click a button, convert the file, watch the animation in CoreSim, and further model it in simulation if need be. We added tools for doing a signal warrant analysis based on the MUTCD, counting cars correctly for arrival demand, and some planning tools from the Florida DOT that other states were beginning to use. Added TWSC as an alternative to signal timing optimization in 2008. 2010 manual came out. We came out with HCS 2010 with all the changes that I've just gone through, and HCS7 came out to implement the HCM6 edition with the changes that, again, I've just referenced through those research reports. So let me show you very quickly what the software looks like. I'm going to bring this over to my screen. And bring up the highway capacity software and just kind of give you a sense for how this works. We have streets. The streets module includes signalized intersection procedure, urban streets intersection, urban streets procedure, interchange ramp terminals, and alternative intersections are all built into one module. Within here is also a travel time reliability for urban streets. For stop control, you have two-way stop control, always stop control. Roundabouts also includes roundabout segments. In freeways, the freeway module implements basic freeway segments, freeway weaving segments, merge and diverge segments, and strings them together into a freeway facility to be able to model over multiple periods, multiple segments for congested freeways. Also a travel time reliability module to implement that on the freeway side. And then highways, multi-lane highways and two-lane highways. Two-lane highways have just been updated to incorporate the brand new chapter that was approved in January. Under tools, didn't mean to do that, sorry. Under tools, you see a reference guide that fills in some blanks in the manual, something I did for the Federal Highway Administration a few years back. Service volume tables for generalized LOS tables out of the capacity manual. Highway safety software implements the highway safety manual procedures. Signal warrant tool for doing an MUTCD signal warrant analysis, and TWSC as an alternative for optimization, although I'll try to tell you that the urban streets optimization is much better. Up here under help, if you click on About, you see your version number and your registration number. You have a button to email McTrans with any questions. If you look at updates, that'll make sure you're at the latest version. We're at 7.8 now. Training courses, you can get to our website to see any live training courses or webinars that we're presenting. This will take you to the Highway Capacity and Quality of Service Committee's website. Support, the frequently asked questions, is typical of questions that come in quite often. They're on that list, but also we have a couple of what we call known issues that will tell you that we fixed something, and we'll give it to you now if you have this issue, or a workaround for an issue that we can't fix because it's printer specific or server network specific. Documentation, the history file gives you bullet lists of what happened version to version to version from 7.7 to 7.8 and so on. It's an Office license that we run for McTrans, which is a little bit unusual. The user's guide is a PDF version of all the built-in help that's reformatted so that you could have a user's manual on the table or on the screen as a book if you would like. So I'll let it be that. I'll show you more as we go along. Let me come back to the slides and keep going with our presentation. And in the 6th edition, the chapter changes. I'll just go through these one by one, again, pretty quickly through each chapter to give you a sense for what changed chapter by chapter. In the 2010 manual, we got rid of interpolating among the free flow speeds, but you see at the bottom of the slide in 2016, the 6th edition, we brought it back. So you now still interpolate among free flow speeds. The base free flow speed default value was established at 75.4, and ramp density replaced interchange density is more accurate than just counting interchanges, since different interchange designs can have different numbers of ramps. In the 6th edition, the ability to model an HOV, HOT express lane with 5 different flavors of design: continuous access, buffer with 1 lane, buffer with 2 lane, barrier with 1 managed lane, barrier with 2 lanes. Adjustments for all freeway segments. There are now adjustments for weather events, driver familiarity, and incidents that adjust speed and capacity for those things being in place. And the new truck procedures that I described earlier were implemented. In freeway weaving in 2010, as I said, the whole chapter was totally redone. But you can still do one-sided, two-sided weaves. You have a dynamic maximum weaving length, which is a function of number of lanes being used and the percentage traffic weaving. That's new in 2010. You check capacity of the weaving segment based on demand and density, and also check the capacities of the ramps. If any of that is exceeded, you must go to a facility to do a multiple period analysis for oversaturated conditions. And again, just like in basic segments, speed and capacity adjustment factors for weather, familiarity, and incidents were also added here. And something called cross weaves, where an on-ramp traffic may cross weave across the general purpose lanes to make its way to the managed lane, which does impact, can impact capacity, and so that's been added as well. Merge and diverge, not much change in 2010 except for the name of the chapter, a little bit ironic. In the 6th edition, those same adjustment factors for capacity and speed for weather, familiar, and incidents were implemented. That crossweave affecting capacity along the segment also affects the capacity for a merge and diverge segment, which is checked against to make sure it's not level service F. And density across all freeway lanes is added to this chapter. It's always been used in a facilities chapter when you have many segments along a facility on a freeway. For freeway facilities, in 2010, the ability to average densities across multiple segments to get a facility-wide level of service was implemented. And in the 6th edition, everything that was implemented in the 3 segment chapters was also implemented here. Except here you also see the work zone procedure I described earlier and travel time reliability across a freeway facility. For multilane highways, that idea of no interpolation among free flow speeds was implemented in 2010 and pulled back out in the 6th edition. Bicycle level of service was added for multilane highway. And in the 6th edition, the density, instead of the EF breakpoint from pass to fail being different among free flow speeds, it was revised to be at 45 like basic freeway segments for all free flow speeds. 2 free flow speeds were added to 65 and 7 to expand what you could model in that multilane highway situation. and the heavy vehicle adjustments were modified to be consistent with basic race segments as well. In fact, it was combined, the two chapters were combined in the 6th edition. Multilane Highways just last month approved a new procedure that has already been implemented in the highway capacity software to change the two-lane highway analysis from depending on percent time spent following and average travel speed for level of service to using follower density, which is consistent with other uninterrupted flow chapters where density defines level of service. More attention was made to vertical and horizontal alignment, which makes a lot of sense in a two-lane highway. And performance measures, again, looking at free flow speed and average speed, but follower density became the service measure that determines level of service. Two-way stop control. The ability to model a stop control approach on a 6-lane major road was added in 2010, as were U-turns if you had a 6 or 4-lane major street. Upstream signals, that was modified to take advantage of what happened in the urban streets procedure with the flow profile in order to get proportion time blocked in front of the stop control intersection to model the platooning effects of a nearby signal on the access of stop control movements. Short lane modeling, the ability to look at rank 1 delay where, let's say, a left turning vehicle must stop waiting on its own gap in traffic and delaying the through vehicles behind him on the major street. 1 peak hour factor for the intersection was implemented for all intersections in 2010 to overcome the dilemma of peak hour factors varying by time for movements, which means you were really modeling things that didn't exist at the same time. Pedestrian level of service added in 2010. No changes in the 6th edition. Always stop control, again, 3-lane approaches where we only could go up to 2-lane approaches before 2010 using the same scenario probability iterative method, just expanding the 3-lane approaches, and added a 95th percentile Q model similar to what's been done in two-way stop control. 1 peak hour factor for the intersection, and no changes in the 6th edition. Roundabouts in 2010 is the first time we could really model a roundabout, again for single-lane, 2-lane roundabouts, single-lane, 2-lane approaches, yielding and non-yielding bypass lanes, delay, level of service. Modified capacity models in the 6th edition to increase capacity somewhere around 30%, and the ability to model segments between roundabouts in order to model roundabouts existing on an arterial. Signalized intersections in 2010, I've already sort of mentioned these. Adherence to NEMA and the phase duration model to come up with that average phase duration over the 15-minute period that could vary among the 5, 10, or 15 cycles within that period. The base saturation flow rate has one breakpoint now. If the population is less than 250,000, the 1900 becomes 1750. Work zone ability to model a work zone on a signalized intersection approach. The D1 equation for uniform delay was modified to account for the fact that arrivals and departures may not be constant, so incremental Q accumulation was added to improve that D1 delay computation. Level of service for pets and bikes added to this chapter in 2010. In the 6th edition, unsignalized movements, what we sometimes call free rights, where you have the exclusive right turn lane that really isn't controlled by the signal. It's separated by a triangular island, and it accesses the cross street with a gap acceptance model, a delay, a stop, or a yield sign. The ability to average that delay into the intersection average to show the benefit of that free right was added. The heavy vehicle and grade factors were combined, so that's one adjustment, not two, to saturation flow in the latest edition of the manual. As I said, work zone capacity, the work zone existing on an approach to a signalized intersection is modeled by adjusting saturation flow for the reduction in lanes or approach width. Auxiliary through lanes is modeled with lane distribution. The X sub C value and the planning method were both broken in 2010 and restored in the 6th edition to be consistent with a change in the shared permitted left turn model. So here's NEMA, just to dig down one level lower to show you what NEMA looks like if you're not familiar. And now the capacity manual adheres to NEMA. Two things I'll point out. The capacity manual looks at permitted lefts because sometimes you have permitted lefts and sometimes you don't. That's beyond NEMA, but consistent with NEMA. Also, right turns may or may not go with throughs. NEMA assumes right turns go with throughs, but as you can see here, an overlap phase might have movement number 18 running at the same time as movement number 1, so we have to be able to model a right turn movement independent of the adjacent through to model that right turn overlap. Down at the bottom of the phase duration model, let me just give you a sense for how that works very quickly. Again, over a 15-minute period, you may have 10 cycles, and in 10 cycles, a left turn phase may have 6 seconds one cycle, 25 seconds one cycle, get skipped one cycle, and what we need to know is what that average time is over those multiple cycles so we can convert a saturation flow to capacity for the 15-minute analysis period. And it goes through an iterative process that includes all these components you see in this chart: startup loss time, clearance loss time, extension of effective green, queue service time, yellow and all red time, are all included in this iterative process over the 8 phases, potential phases that you see above. So it is a complex procedure, but a very necessary one. We have to know what that average is. Guessing at that average is guessing at the final answer. Something I usually bring up, and I won't dwell on this because this is not a training course, but too often people go out and count cars, and they sometimes get that wrong, as I'll show you in just a moment. But you need other things when you're doing a signalized analysis. You need to know the right turn on red numbers. You need to know how many parking maneuvers there are going in and out of spaces by a 15-minute period for on-street parking. You need to know how many buses stop within the travel lane within 250 feet of the signal, with a bus stop there affecting the saturation flow rate. You need to know the percent heavy vehicles. You need to know lane distribution. Sometimes you can all think of lanes where more cars are in one lane versus the adjacent lane because of what's happening downstream. And that lowers the capacity of not fully utilizing those 2 lanes. And so that needs to be at least noted while you're out there collecting data. You also have to count pedestrians and bicycles as they affect the saturation flow of a signal. So very quickly, just a note that you have to know a lot more than just turning movement counts to model a signalized intersection and take advantage of what all the parameters the model is capable of employing. So the peak hour factor, this is something that changed in 2010. The peak hour factor is no longer by movement because movements can peak at different times, and that's just not appropriate. But the peak hour factor is only used for planning purposes in the signalized intersection analysis. We look at 15-minute periods independently, and that overcomes the dilemma of the peak hour factor, but it does something much more important than that. A multiple period analysis of a signal is mandatory to get a congested signal correct, and I'll briefly explain. It says planning only for that analysis over on the left side, where you got an hourly volume, you divide by a peak hour factor to get a flow rate, you keep going like you do in most chapters. But if it's an operational procedure, which is design or signal timing or traffic impact studies or even short-range planning, it's really an operational procedure. You have to look at each period independently in order to model the effects of one period can have on the next. And many people that are probably listening to this have counted cars at intersections before. And the point I'm going to make now is that we must count arrival rate. We can't just count the departure flow. So if you're just counting cars going across the stop bar, you're not getting the right number if the signal is congested. you must count the unmet demand at the end of each 15-minute period in order to compute the actual arrival rate at that signal by movement. So very quickly, again, this is not a training course, but very quickly I'll just give you a quick example. You can tell I made this up. But the first two periods are unsaturated and there's no unmet demand at the end. But in period 3, 500 cars go across the stop bar, 25 made it in period 3 but didn't get processed. So the period 3 demand is 525, not just the stop bar count. In period 4, the first 25 cars here are these 25, so you can't count them twice. You subtract the 25 from the 500, you add the 475 to the unmet demand at the end of the period to get the arrival rate for that period. You play this game only by counting the end of period Q in order to get to the demand by period. Over here you see the yellow line is plotting the demand, the blue line is plotting the stop bar count, which tops out at capacity as it must. The capacity manual says the peak of the yellow line is level of service. So you have to count the cars right in order to have the right input to the procedure, and you have to do it in multiple periods because one period affects the next. Now, in the bottom right, you see a tool that comes with HCS. We've actually converted this to an app. I really should have a picture of the app there instead. But it allows you to count this middle column. At the end of the 15-minute period during the last cycle, you can count this distance. We convert it to cars. We play the little arithmetic game here, and we save this last number to a file. And so when you pull that file into HCS, you actually get multiple periods arrival rate populated automatically. And you probably can't see it, but down here you can also count those other things that I say you need: heavy vehicles, pedestrians, bicycles, parking maneuvers, buses stopping, that sort of thing that plays a role. Right turns on red that play roles in modeling the intersection. You can all do it with one tool, and now it's going to be an app that works on your phone as well. If you do a single period analysis, then you're ignoring the fact that one period affects the next period, that these 25 cars affect the subsequent period. In fact, the way you look at it is, if I'm the very first car that arrives in period number 4, I'm already behind 25 cars because they were left over. That extra delay the 25 cars in front of me causes is called D3 delay, initial Q delay. And here's initial Q delay. If you ignore this, you're going to get this as your answer for delay, whereas if you had included it, you get this answer, and it's not a trivial difference. In fact, several years ago, we had a student run a little sensitivity analysis, and I'm not sure you can see this, but what she found was that if the VDC ratio is less than 1, single period and multiple period are going to give you the same answer because there's no unmet demand. But as the VDC ratio goes up to, let's say, 1.54 in this row about right here, the difference in a single period analysis is going to give you about 100 seconds of delay if the VDC ratio is equal to 1, because you just count the cars going across the stop bar. And doing it correctly is going to be 372%. And if you think about it, at a signalized intersection where the VDC ratio is 1.5, there's going to be quite a few cars waiting through multiple cycles. So if you're waiting through multiple cycles and you finally get through after the second or third cycle, and the cycle is 150 seconds, your delay is much closer to 372 seconds than it is to the 100 seconds that you'll get in a single period analysis. So you must do a multiple period analysis to model a congested signal. And so our conclusion from that was you have to count the cars correctly, including actual arrival demand, and you have to run a multiple period analysis to model the effects of periods on one another as it builds and dissipates over a 2 or 3 hour rush period, let's say. And so be sure that if it's up to you to count the cars, count them correctly. But if you're accepting something from someone else, you want to be sure they actually counted that middle column from a couple of slides back. Urban streets, the flow profile. Again, the flow profile is the way we model proportion arriving on green these days instead of just modeling, picking arrival type. And you can model the access points effect on the platoons mid-segment if you model them in urban streets procedure. Not a lot changed. Added parking activity mid-segment. Two effects on saturation flow for blocking the segment or for a queue backing up from the downstream intersection. And again, this is the flow profile showing you what happens with a platoon. In other words, if you look over here, I've got this through movement that I'm trying to, I want to know how many of these three cars, of these through cars, arrive on green down here. And in this example, they all do. This is the flow profile of this platoon here. Then after this light, you get a left turn phase off the side street, and that's this platoon. And you can see it's a platoon because it's a peak. And then after that ends, you got right turns that are relatively random, and they come later, and they sort of flatten out because they're not at a peak. So just one example of how these three movements play into this flow profile, give you proportion arriving on green for this well-coordinated two signals. But think about what happens when there's access points. You got this car slowing down, and it turns into the access point. You have to slow down as well. So every car that turns into the access point slows down pieces of the platoon. So what that does is that makes this spill over here. It arrives later. And also what happens is when you slow down for this car to turn, the car in front of that car did not slow down. So the platoon is now breaks into pieces, no longer contiguous. And so not only does this lean over, but it breaks into spots, making more and more arrive on the red. So access points definitely affect this. You want to model them to be able to model what's happening out there. Urban Streets Facility allows you to get the facility level of service for the urban street, just like we do for freeways. And again, that's the same spill back from the downstream signal and travel time reliability in urban streets as well. Interchange ramp terminals came in 2010 to model the effects of these two signals that sort of know each other, primarily looking at lane utilization, how traffic picks a lane at one signal because of what they're going to do to get on the freeway at the next signal. Traffic pressure, where saturation flow actually increases as more cars show up because people get more anxious and the headways go down. Turn radius is a better estimate of saturation flow adjustment than just lefts and rights. In the training course, we dig into that enough to illustrate those things. You see additional lost time for a couple of situations that kind of need pictures to explain. But the thing at the bottom is something you probably don't know. Up until last month, the ability to get an interchange level of service didn't exist. You've got 14 answers. You've got a level of service for 14 different origin destination movement pairs. And in January, the committee says, okay, we're going to allow this weighted average like we do every place else. And so now you're going to get an interchange level of service. And here your diverging diamond at the top. The displaced left turn, sometimes called continuous flow. Restricted crossing U-turn, sometimes called super street, where everybody on the right on the side street turns right. You come back if you want to turn left to go through. And then this one, everybody that wants to turn left has to go down and come back for the MUT. These are all now modeled in the highway capacity manual procedures. So let me just show you, I'm not going to go through every module, but I'll show you a few modules here, a couple anyway. And let's see, where are we? Yeah, we're pretty close to the end. So let me just show you this very quickly. And I'll just, as I did before, bring up the software. And just to give you a sense, I'll show you freeways, and I'll bring up a freeway facility analysis. And the way freeways works in the software now, this is the example out of the manual, and if I go to segments, I see I've got this graphic of the multiple segments, 11 segments in this example problem, and you see the distances and some data here. But if I want to look at a given segment, I just click on the segment, and it shows me the segment. It shows me the input data of the segment, and I can do that for any segment, any time period. If I go to the report, I see the report for each segment over 5 time periods. I've got 11 segments here, and then a consolidated averages across the whole facility for the report. And if I wanted to look at any segment report, I just switch to segment reports and pick a segment. I go to number 6, that's a weave, and it shows me the weaving segment report individually. So I'll stop there. I just want to give you a taste for the freeway side of things. Over here on stop control, just to let you see what a two-way stop control looks like. This example one out of the manual as well. And it shows general information here. I'm going through this very quickly, but I'm just trying to give you a taste. Lane configuration. The way we do all intersections in the HCS is you add a lane with a button. And if you didn't want to do that, you just take it away. So you just play with it until you get what you want. Turn movement counts are always east, west, north, south. U-turns, lefts, throughs, and rights in that order, so you kind of get used to it. Headway values out of the manual, you probably want to calibrate those. Adjustments here for pedestrians and the platoons in the report for two-way stop control. It gives you delay and level of service. I'll show you roundabouts very quickly. And I'll make a point here too while I'm at it. Here's example one out of the manual. Geometry is sort of done the same way. We toggle the lanes here by approach. You can toggle them on or off for 1 or 2 lanes. You can add a lane, you can take it away. The bypass lanes are outside the approach, yellow for yielding, green for non-yielding. This is example one that has 1 of each. Turning movement counts. Let me show you the results here. If I show you the results for this example problem, and just go all the way to the bottom and see I got an intersection level service of C at 17 seconds. But very quickly, I'm going to show you before the new capacity values were increased. This is that same problem with the 2010 procedure before the capacities were changed. And if I go to the report and go to the bottom, you see this is twice the delay and 2 levels. This is 35 seconds of delay level service E in 2010, but actually after they improved the capacity values, it's half the delay and level service C instead of E. Now jump on over here to streets, and I'll just show you very quickly. I'll just pull up, maybe I'll pull up this example that's right outside my window. This example one out of the capacity manual, 2 signals with sort of made up data, and you can tell. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time because that would take me into training course mode. But again, you modify the intersection the same way by adding and subtracting lanes. You can allow permitted left turns here by clicking these buttons, and all of a sudden you get permitted lefts, or I can take them away. I could take away the protected lefts or add overlaps. You see the overlaps are added there. Or I could take away everything. I can put them back. You have turning movement counts here. Again, if you pull that data in, it'll populate the turning movement counts for you for as many time periods as you pull in, as well as most of the other data on the left side of this screen. This is the result of the phase duration model. Gray is actuated, blue is non-actuated, dotted is permitted. I know I'm going very quickly, but I just want to give you a taste. Signal timing, minimum, maximum times, and so on down here. You can lag phases by just checking on it to get a lagging left. You can do lead lag phasing. You can do Dallas phasing. All of that is here. You can make it totally fully actuated by just unchecking the box, and it goes on fully actuated. Check it back and check it again. It goes back to coordinated actuated with a constant cycle length up here at the top. Again, I'll just show the reports very quickly. Here's a signalized summary that show you turning movement counts, controller settings, phases, phase duration model, and down here you get delay and level of service by lane group approach in the intersection as a whole. You also have a segment report. We're looking at the segment between the two signals. You have a graphical summary of the signal that color codes the delay by level of service. The longer this, the longer the delay, the longer the black line, the longer the queue, kind of a unique way of looking at things. And just one couple more things before I quit. If I zoom in on this a little bit, you can see that this is what we call visual mode. And in visual mode, you can just take a Google Maps bitmap image, JPEG image, and I'm actually in this building right here, and I just pretended that these two signals existed over here. If this were not a straight road, you could match the curve to the road itself. So you can do several things here, and I won't go through anything else right now. Just to show you that if you had 15 signals along an arterial, you get the map, you plop things down, you scale the map. Maybe it's a better way to do it. It's an optional thing. We'll go back to classic mode. I'll just show you that you can get a time-space diagram and look at, say, 3 cycles in both directions. You can also optimize. Let me just show you what optimization does. Now, the HCS optimizes much better than anybody gives you credit for. It can do cycle length splits and offsets. You can do it for arterial delay, overall delay, level of service is percent time, base free flow speed. You can even look at safety and emissions if you want to. You can do range of cycle length. You can give, let's suppose you're doing an AM peak period and 80% of the traffic's going in the forward direction, you can get 80% of the weight. And you just run through the process and it goes through it, and it's like an algorithm. The biggest thing about this to remember is that this is all based on the HCM. This is research-driven, peer-reviewed, including multiple period analysis, including flow profile, including access points, phase duration, all built into the optimization process. So you're getting everything analyzed correctly, and that's all being considered as you optimize the timing. And I'll just stop there. Now I've got one more thing to show you if I can find it quickly. Let me see, I believe I know where it is. And if I go here, and if I go here. This is TransModeler, now built into HCS, and this is a better way to simulate. You can pull HCS data into TransModeler and have it running already. This happens to be an intersection here in Gainesville, and I'm just showing you. One thing it does is it's kind of unique that these colors represent the delay of the vehicle. So these vehicles arriving here haven't been delayed 10 seconds yet. And so the light turns green, they kind of keep going. They don't even make it to 10 seconds delay by the time they get through. The cars that are waiting up front, they change colors. And so it's a kind of a unique way to look at it. I'm just going to fast forward a little bit and show you a little closer view of this somewhat skewed but major intersection here in town. This was done in HCS, translated over to TransModeler, and the animation shown here. Now, this is a real, these are real buildings. This comes from Google Maps, but this also could be bigger. Let me zoom out a little bit and just kind of walk down the road a little bit. You see, this is the intersection we were looking at. I'm going to take us down here closer to the freeway so you can see that interchange. Get down here. Yeah, see, you're now seeing that intersection up here, and here's the interchange at the other end. Just to give you a sense for how this works. Now, what I have not shown you is the 3D where you can get down on the vehicle level and follow the vehicle. You can do all those things in this package as well. So let me just stop there. I'm going to go back to the presentation. And just bring this to your attention. If you want to do a training course, just let us know. Now, one option is we do webinars through McTrans every month or two. You can sign up and take the webinar. If you want a webinar for your group, we can do that. If you want us to come to your location, we can do that and do a live course. It can be open for the public, like run through an ITE, local ITE chapter or something, or closed, like running it for a DOT. McTrans can take care of everything, or we can do less and let you do more and adjust the fees accordingly. It can be the full 3-day course, which would be hands-on, a 2-day course, which is going through all the procedures with software demonstrations instead of hands-on. It can be just urban streets. It can be whatever you want it to be. The point I'm trying to make is we're very flexible. We're willing to do this any way you like, anywhere you want, online or in person, with computers, without computers, focusing on whatever you'd like to focus on. So I'll just close this with that idea. Give you my contact information. There's my email address and my phone number. If it ever comes up where you would like to hold a training course or just keep a look on our website, and you can come to one of ours. Either way works for us. And just kind of pointing out what's happened with the manual, with the software, and how you can learn through a training course all the details that you need to know. So with that, I appreciate your time and attention, and we can take questions at this point.